This is Paul Nobles from Eat to Perform, and I just wanted to run through what some people have referred to as the secret fat loss system. And so I'll jokingly talk about that. But if you want to follow more of what we talk about, subscribe to our channel, make sure you like these videos. One of the people that I talk with in the industry fairly often sort of chides me every now and again and says, you give away all the secrets, and the simple fact is that this math is really not the secret, and I'll sort of run through that later on. But what I'm going to do here is sort of demystify how our team comes up with your calorie numbers for the wave method. And so in this instance, we have a 43-year-old female. She is very active. She weighs 200 pounds. She's got a lot of lean mass, though. She has about 130 pounds of mass, which is really good for a female. It's not easy for women to build mass like that. Right now we have her at 2,450 calories, or basically at moderately active. What we're just trying to do at this point is get her eating a certain amount of food, but also kind of keeping fat off. We don't want her to gain weight in the process. Her real calories, though, are 2,750, and so that's what's going to be represented in the numbers that the protein, carbs, and fats numbers are based off of her 2,450 number. And we'll walk through a little bit on how we adjust that as the calories get lower. Like I said, she's 200 pounds. Her goal is to get to the CrossFit Games. In this strategy right here, what we're trying to do is get her to 170 pounds by the time she's 45. There would actually be enough time for her to get to 160 if that were a goal. And so we'll walk through that process and how she would be able to get there. But let me first of all demystify the calorie wave method macros. And it changes for a little bit for bigger people, and it changes a little bit for smaller people. But in general, what I do is I subtract 650 off of her top number. And the reason why I do that off of her top number is what I'm trying to do is get the most effect with the least amount of interference. And basically what I mean when I say that is I would like her to see a result without having to go too extreme, because when you go too extreme, ultimately a lot of times people will rebound out of that. And so what we're trying to do is just slowly get her a result, and walk through that a little bit as we go. So basically we've got her at 2,450 calories. She is doing the open right now, and so we're going to keep her there throughout the open. And like I said, she's a really good athlete. It's just the body fat is kind of holding her back from the goals that she really wants to achieve. And so once the open is done, basically from April through May, we'll take those 8 to 10 weeks, and then we'll cycle her down. So if you look at the 2,750 number, I took 650 off of that, and then took 300 calories to create her her waves. So basically she's at 2,100 calories on active days, 1,800 calories on low active days, so days like yoga, maybe like hiking, some things like that, and then 1,500 for rest days. Now you'll notice that I have 1,800 and 1,500 circled. And the reason why I do so is because what we ultimately want you to do is get results, right? Using the wave method and keeping activity in the equation. So if you work out 6 times a week, let's continue working out 6 times a week. But if you start to see that you're not getting a result, the two things that we need you to do are, remember, if your goal is fat loss, you have to be focused on fat loss. And so in the time where she's at 21, 1800, and 1500, do you think that her athletic abilities are going to be increased? Probably not. I mean, certainly body weight movements improve when you're at a lower body weight, obviously. But the goal here is to sort of focus on the prize, and you'll see that this isn't really near as aggressive. I mean, if she works out 5 days a week, and she has maybe 2 days where one is low active and one is inactive, well, that's not going to put her in a huge deficit. And so what happens for some people, she might actually be able to get away with what she's able to get away with right now at a low average. The average, kind of depending on how many rest days you have with this calorie formula, is like 1850 to 1900. Sort of, like I said, depends on how many low days you have in there. And so as she would move through, let me give you an example. Let's say that she goes from 200 to 195, and that is easy. She's able to work out 5 times a week, and only have one inactive rest and then one rest day. But she sort of stalls at that 195 point around week 4, week 5. Well, at that point, we need to start, looking at more rest days. And it seems counterintuitive to a lot of people, because obviously we're Eat to Perform, and the goal is to teach people to perform better in their workouts. She might be able to get away with going from 200 to 190 with very little rest at all. But all I'm saying is if she starts to stall, the thing that she needs to do is have more low active days and more rest days. And so once she's at 190, once again, we're going to reverse her out of that. So it'll usually take somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 to 10 weeks to reverse back to her normal calories. In this instance, though, we want to get her back to the high number. So while she's at 2450 right now, when she's at 190, I want to get her to 2750. And what that basically means is that her work capacity is going to go up. I have done some case studies. You can look back at those for I think it was a 25-year-old moderately active female, where her goal was not to increase work capacity, and I kind of run through the scenario on how to do that. So you'd have to look for that video. I am going to try and organize these into playlists at some point, and so it'll be easier for you guys to find. But I'm a little YouTube challenged at this point, so I'll have to ask my daughter for a little help. So from June through August, we're going to be reversing her out of the 190 dieting cycle in the 21, 1800, 1500, and we're going to work her way up to 2750. Then from September to October, you'll notice that her numbers actually stay the same. The only difference is that her calories actually were at 2750. I do have sort of a sneaky suspicion that she'll have to hang around this 1800 to 1500 in the first cycle, a little bit more than she would like. But in the second cycle, hanging around that 18 to 1500 probably isn't going to be that big of a deal. If it is that big of a deal, once again, I mean, you can't really serve two masters. In this instance, what she's trying to do is get more athletic ability, and becoming more fit. And so losing fat's a big part of that equation. The one thing I didn't put down here was what her weight would be at 2750. She's basically going to be starting this cycle at about 190 pounds. She might be 192.5 or something like that, but it's not, she's right at that 190 number. And then as she gets down here to the bottom, she'll be 180. The one caveat I will say is that after, let's say, 10 weeks, I think you get to a point of diminishing returns. And so even if she were to land at 183, I would counsel her to stop at that point. So basically, she's going to go through September and October. Coming into the holidays, she'll be upping her work capacity into the open for next year, which at that time she'll be 44. And then we're going to kind of go through these cycles. You'll notice that in the next cycle, her calories are at 2,900. They might not need to go that high, but it's better to kind of illustrate this example. And as long as her work capacity is going up, and what a lot of people don't realize is that as you're training for this type of athletic competition, the volume is going to go sky high, and so she could probably get to that 2,900 number relatively easy, because the difference between being 200 pounds and 180 pounds from the standpoint of pull-ups and body weight movements and things of that nature become a lot easier. And so her waves basically look like 2250, 1950, and 1650. And so while there might be some minor changes depending on the individual, in general, this formula sort of works. 650. The reason why I do 650 is because 500 calories basically will get you 1 pound a week. I haven't really gone into the carbohydrates. I probably will in just a second. But 650 will get you 1 pound, or 500 will get you 1 pound a week. But the problem that exists is that your resting metabolic rate, your NEAT, all those things are negatively affected. And so we actually try to go a little bit deeper than just 500 calories, and we find that 650 is pretty good for most people. But if they struggle or they're not getting a result, once again, we don't have to worry about the 650 number. What we really need to worry about are those inactive and the rest days, because at that point, ultimately what's going to end up happening is you're not getting enough of a deficit, but you're also maybe creating too much of a stress atmosphere with all the working out. And so what we want to do in periods of fat loss is focus on fat loss, and in periods of activity, like this and this, we really want to focus on upping work capacity. In terms of carbs and fats, okay, so basically on the 2100 day, she's going to be mostly reliant on fats. We'll probably bring her fats somewhere in the neighborhood of about 50 grams. That'll be the same for the 1800 day. Probably can get away close to 50 grams on the 1500 day, but you might want to be able to move to something like 65 grams. And in that instance, we're going to lower the carbohydrates. So let's say that, not using this example because obviously the numbers are going to be a little bit lower, but let's say that her carbs, at 2100 would be 225, something, I'm trying to do the math in my head, but 80 grams of carbohydrates lower basically gets her to about this 1800 number. These are the things we sort of coach people through. But what I'm saying in this message, you guys might not see this because the video might be covering it, but the secret really isn't the math. That's what the my fitness friend has wrong. It's really walking people through, some of the hurdles that they have mentally. That's the real secret. That's the what we provide. And I think you guys see that as members. And if you're not a member, you would see that is the, one of the things that's a big advantage of having these short cycles is that the adherence is so much better. And especially if you go into the thought process of, hey, look, at 10 weeks, no matter what weight I'm at, I'm stopping. What that allows you to do is be a little bit more adherent. Also, while you can't have, ice cream every day and things of this nature, you'll be able to fit in a lot of foods that you like at that 2100 number. So I'm hoping this helps. I'm hoping this demystifies a little bit of what we're talking about. And, like I said, the one thing that I'm thinking I might have forgot to cover here is that she is going to want to keep that 130 pounds, but also she may want to get to 160 at one point. That might actually mean that her lean mass would go a little bit lower, but that's not a huge deal when somebody's lost 40 pounds over the course of, say, a year and a half. So I hope that helps. I hope that demystifies The Secret. And if you guys have any questions, hit us up on Facebook and we'll answer those. So thanks a lot.